We're mentioning the laws of Chazara on Shabbat. Just to give a little bit background. Before Shabbat, we put up our hot food. We put up the cholent, we put up the chamin, or whatever we're putting up before Shabbat. And it comes Shabbat, it's cooking on its own. Now, what if somebody wants to take something on Shabbat from the fire, take a little bowl, eat a little bit chamin, and then afterwards put it back on the fire on Shabbat? Is that called cooking on Shabbat, or that's okay? That's called chazara, putting back on. And we mentioned that it depends on a bunch of different details. Number one, the main differentiation you have to realize is the food dry, like a kugel or a challah or something like that, or is it wet, like a hamin, a cholent, or something like that? When it's dry, it's much more mekel, which means all you need is basically to make sure that the food was totally cooked. It's a cooked item, you just want to put it back on to keep warm, keep hot. And that's pretty much what you have to be careful on. And you can just put it back as long as you're putting it on the blech. Be careful you're not putting it on an open fire. You got to be putting on a blech, a Shabbos with the covering, or a Shabbos plata, we call it, that special Shabbos warmer, which doesn't have a knob that goes up and down. So you have two things. When you're doing with davar yavesh, something, a dry item, all you got to do is make sure it's cooked, and you're putting it on a blech. And that's fine. You can take it off on Shabbos, you can put it back on Shabbos. Not only could you take it off and put it back on Shabbat, it doesn't even have to be that it was on there on Shabbat. It could be it was in your fridge. Many people, they take their chali, Shabbos morning, they put it on the blech to heat up. They want warm challah, that's fine. Or a kugel, they have their kugel in the fridge, they want the kugel to heat up, they put it on the blech. Shabbat morning, by the time they come up from shul, 11 o'clock, it's going to be warm. That's fine. At least for Sfaradim, 100%. Some have a chumrah to put it not so close to the fire. That's more Ashkenazi realm. For us, we could be a little more mekel, and as long as it's yavesh, Hamavadi says clearly, you could put it on a blech, even if it's going to get hot, so let it go. That is the rule of the davar yavesh. When something is wet, it's more tricky. When something is wet, we have more of an issue of getting cooked. When something's wet, you're talking about juice, that's called real cooking. It's considered more cooking than when it's dry. And therefore you need to make sure that besides the fact that it's cooked, and besides the fact that you're putting it on the blech, you have to also make sure that when you took it off, you still did not put it down into a permanent condition. For example, if a person takes his pot of cholent off the fire, he pours himself a bowl, and then he takes the cholent and he puts it in the fridge when he's done. It's still hot. He realizes 5 minutes later, you know what am I doing? What am I putting in the fridge for? I have to put it back on the fire for tomorrow. And he wants to take it out. That is a problem. Once he put it in a permanent place, he cannot put it back on. But if he's still holding it, if he had in mind completely to put it back on, and he took it off, it's still hot, and he wants to put it back on, that's fine. He's allowed to put it back on even if it's wet. So again, you need that he had dot to put it back on. He meant to put it back on. He took it off. He didn't put it in a permanent place. He's putting it back in, and it's cooked already, and he's putting it on the blech. That's fine, 100%. These are the laws of chazara. I just want to mention one more halakha for today, and that is when it comes to a hot water urn. This is very important. A hot water urn before Shabbat. An urn is not considered a covered fire. It's considered a real fire, because the urn itself is a fire. And you could, when you put water in it, you're basically putting it on top of an open stove. That's what an urn is. And therefore, it's like putting something on a stove without a covering. It does not have a rule of a blech. When you put something in a hot water urn, it does not have a rule of a blech. Therefore, when you putting up hot water for Shabbat, you have to make sure that the water is already boiling before Shabbat. You cannot put it right before Shabbat and then it's starting to cook as Shabbat comes in, because the rule is you cannot put something on a fire a little bit before Shabbat if it doesn't have a Shabbos blech. And therefore the hot water urn is an area which people don't realize you have to be more careful. You have to make sure it's on a half hour before Shabbat, give it enough time to boil before Shabbat. Otherwise, you cannot drink from the water on Shabbat. Important rule that people don't realize when it comes to hot water urns. Anyway, here at Soviet, you should keep the halachot of Shabbat. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.